Oh my god! Oh my god! Okay, we got a couple. Okay, it sounds like we got... Chat! You can't even say it's fucking lucky anymore! This is just skilled, right, Kiba? What is up, boys? I am here to talk to you guys about Blight today. Probably been my most profitable strategy of the whole league, and it's also a lot of fun. Like, as you saw, you get just giga loot explosions. The actual content is maybe not that much fun. Maybe it is. I personally enjoyed it, but it definitely might not be your cup of tea, especially with how laggy it gets. But it's pretty fun. If you're a fan of tower defense games, you will like Blight for sure, because there is some like strategic stuff that you can do that will make it so even if you might not have the best gear, you can still run it a little bit more optimally than other people do if you can kind of like plot out your towers a little bit better. Anyways, I like to start off these videos just by talking about like the budget requirements and like how much investment you're going to need in order to do these specific farms. So let's get into that right now. I was initially running a Smite Trickster build with around a 500, 600 div budget maybe. That one was okay. I was able to complete probably like 70% of the Blights. I'll get into this later, but you don't actually need to complete 100% of the Blights in order to make this a really profitable method. I did not, and I still can't. If you complete 70% of a Blight, you will get pretty much 70% of the loot. If you complete 80% of the Blight, you'll get 80% of the loot. So not being able to completely finish the Blight isn't the biggest deal in the world. Obviously, you want to be able to kill every mob, maximum efficiency out of it, but I think the strategy is so profitable that even though I was failing like 30% of my Blights, it was still very worth it to do. So with the Smite build, I would say I definitely had struggles with clear. I had struggles with just tankiness just because, you know, you have to kind of get up in there because your AoE is so low that you end up dying more because of it. Whereas with KB, you can kind of fight them from the side and you have a little bit more range advantage, that kind of stuff, and your AoE is a lot better. That is kind of where I was with Smite. I was a 500 div investment, and then now with my KB build, this is under a mirror. So still considered budget for KB. I think you kind of need like 2 mirrors of KB gear in order to get it running officially, because you need the mirror wand, which is insane, like a 50% increase in damage. And then you need the simplex, which also is insane, in conjunction with the mirror wand, that is. But I didn't have any of that. I don't have the simplex. I don't have a mirror wand. This is a shitter 30 div wand that, you know, you can self-craft pretty easily, but it was definitely good enough for me to start trying the strategy. With that being said, though, my Smite DPS was around 250 to 300 mil DPS when I had the Tincture activated and when I had like my Vol Haste activated and when I had Focus activated, all that stuff. But the problem is that although the DPS was really high, I think 300 mil is more than good enough. The AoE was a little bit too low. With KB on this budget build, I only do like 150 to 200 mil DPS with everything activated. Barely not good enough, but it still feels better than the Smite build. And of course, though, it costs like 500 div more of investment. So actually one thing that I was thinking about retrospectively, now that I finished it all, was adding something like Arise flasks. I would just say remove one of your utility flasks, like a diamond flask or whatever, or like a silver flask I'm running now, and then put an Arise end in, just because it'll help you so much with AoE DPS, which is pretty much 90% of the battle. KB, Dying Sun plus Arise. Smite, it would be Tincture plus Arise. Anyways, this is kind of what I experienced in terms of the 2 different budgets for the builds that I was running. 500 div Smite and then like 1.1k div, less than a mirror KB. They definitely both weren't strong enough to run this at maximum efficiency. So that's something that you might need to take into consideration, but they were definitely good enough to get the lion's share of the loot. So let's take a look at the currency that we made from doing all of these Blights. We have 3 sets of 25 maps, so 75 maps total. So just raw currency drop, which is going to be the bulk of everything. We did the 1 div raw currency. We dropped 2,300 chaos orbs, 105 exalts, around 8k alterations. I was only picking up stacks of like 10 or more. So like these were worth, I think, roughly 1C each. Oh shit, they're worth way less than that now. 14k would be like 10 div, right? So this is like a little bit more than 5 div in alterations. Exalts are 5 to 1 div, so this is 20 div in exalts. So let's call this 25 div and these 2 currencies. Chaoses are 1 div to 120 now. Is that still the case? No, 135. Okay, they kind of bounce back. 135. That means this is easily like 15, 17 div. Chisels are 1 to 1.5. Let's call gem cutter. These are like 1 to 1.2. Let's call it 1.5. This is around 1k chaos. This is 5 div and GMPs plus chisels. This was 30, 81, 86 div here. Stacked decks are 2 chaos per, we'll call them. So this is only like 250, so that's like 2 div. So it's like what, 89 div. Oh, and we have 60 Valdos. How much are Valdos going for? Oof. 1.4, we'll call it. So 60 Valdos divided by 1.4. 42 div. Wow, 42 div in Valdos still is not bad. So what is that? 87 plus 42. We'll call it 130 div. So we dropped 130 div raw currency, being very conservative. 2 locks, I think, but we're only going to count one of them because it feels like 2 is a little bit lucky. Locks are around 220 div each. And I think it's pretty expected to be able to drop 1 lock in 75 Blight maps. But that actually might be a little bit too conservative. It actually might just be 2 locks, or maybe like 1.5, but let's just be conservative. So this is 130 plus a lock, which is 220, which is 350 div and just pretty much pure raw currency. We have some chaos, like we have some Eldritch Chaos. It's probably like 5 div in Eldritch Chaos, but let's call it 350. If we were to like nickel and dime everything, it would be like closer to like 360, 370. There are going to be uniques that we drop that are going to be worth a decent amount of money. Like these are both at least, these are a div each. This is half a div. This is 2 div. We can Wealthy Exile these 3 tabs. Wealthy Exile is generally quite conservative actually in their calculations of everything. These are pricing these maps at like 70 C each when we can sell them for like 100 C each. So it looks like what's left in these tabs. So 70 div, 78 div for this tab. Holy shit. And then 313 div for this tab minus 239 is what, 70? So 70, 70, 78. That's actually fucking insane. Am I calculating this wrong? It's 240 div in non-currency. Keep in mind we made 350 div in just currency. So altogether, it was like 600 div. In 75 maps, we made 600 div, not including the Mage Bloods, okay? We dropped 3 Mage Bloods in 75 maps. That felt a little bit too lucky. You can include however much you'd want. I'd probably include 100 div of it in terms of the EV, because you drop a fuck ton of uniques every Blight. We dropped a normal Mage Blood and we dropped the dupe Mage Blood. So our total was closer to like 900 div from these Blights, but if you want to just count it as 100 div, you want to count it as 50 div, you want to just not count it at all, that's acceptable as well. Let's just call it 550 div to be incredibly conservative, right? 550 div in just currency, maps, and Scarabs. Yeah, that's actually insane. Over 75 maps, not including the Mage Blood, and only including one of the 2 Hinekora locks that we dropped. That's kind of crazy, no? Because that means what? 550 divided by 75? You're making around 7 div a map. You don't count the dupe, but the 2 drops are fair to count in. Let's just count one of the drops. If we just count one of the Mage Blood drops that we got, that was worth 100 div, let's just say. Now 650 divided by 75. You are making around 8.7 div per map. And keep in mind, out of the 75 maps that I did, I probably failed 20% of them, okay? I failed at least 20% of them, all right? So the actual number is probably higher, but like the way it works is if you fail a map and you complete like 99% of it, and you just like don't kill the last mob or you die in the last mob, you still make like 99% of the value. I guess we should talk about the costs, right? What are the actual costs for the Blight? You're running double risk plus Invig plus Blight Heart. These are worth nothing. These are worth like 30. These are worth 50, I think. Invigoration. Okay, Invigorations are worth like 39. Let's call this 40 and the other one 35, right? Just to be conservative. So 75 plus 2 risks. These risks are 20 each. So it's like 110 C. Let's say like 0.8 of a div per map. And then the fortresses are like half a div. You can buy them for like, maybe like, they're probably closer to like 0.6 now. So let's just call it 1.5 div per map. Let's say you spend half a div rolling. So let's just say it's 2 div per map then, right? So the actual profit would be what, like, so yeah, you're making like 6.5, 7 div per map profit, excluding the 2 Mage Blood. This is profit, including the cost. And we can just check. How long did it take me to do like 5 maps here? I was doing around 7 per hour. But at the current profit number of around 6.7 div per map, multiplied by the 7 maps that we're doing an hour, we're making close to like 45, 50 div an hour. Okay, so let's talk about the tree real quick. This is actually a really straightforward one. I'm going to go through it probably in like a couple minutes because it's just really simple. I mean, we're playing Blight, right? So the things that we care about are these Blight nodes. We pretty much take every single node here. We actually, if we could find a point to do it, we would take this as well, just because the monsters get so fucking tanky, okay? The only Blight wheel we don't take is this one, and it just gives you maps, which we don't really care about. The second part of this mechanic primarily is going to be using Settlers of Calgor to get more ore deposits. So the thing about ore deposits is, if you look here, I think we have like a 70% chance to get an ore deposit. But then we also take Calgor on the map device, but we're essentially just fishing for bismuth nodes. The bismuth ore nodes will actually give monsters more juice in a pretty meaningful way. That on top of like potentially getting Viridian Wildwood, juice your map by what feels like an extra like 30 to 40%. And then when they stack on top of each other, it's just, you're actually getting like 2 or 3x your rewards. Here's just like classic like Eater altar stuff. You can go left side for red or right side for blue. I just went red because we're running CI plus Mage Blood, which means that we can kind of negate like 80% of the downside altars. Whereas over here, we ended up having to skip a lot of them just because we felt like we couldn't handle having not fully capped resistances. Whereas over here, these would mostly affect chaos resistance or like flask stuff. So we literally completely negate that. So we went here, but I would imagine that once we get a little bit more budget on our build, we would actually be able to go over to this right side. I would say this right side is pretty significantly better. You get more quant, you get higher chance for dupes, which are the two best altars nodes. I would actually say currency dupe is going to be your most valuable altar reward. More than half of our profit off of currency, just pure currency drops. So duping currency, I think 45% on the blue side and like something like 30% on this red side. But if you think about it, right, our maps are going to be pretty juiced with all of these map modifier effects. So what ends up happening is our map is already going to baseline have like 300% quant. It's going to have 350, like 400% increased currency as well. If we have 300% quant, if we get another, let's just say max roll, we get a max roll 20% quant on our drops, right? Because of diminishing marginal returns on quant, that's only like a net, 7% increase in the amount of loot that we get. Whereas if we get 25, 30% currency as one of the loot options, then that is pretty much a 30% increase to what we just established is more than half of the value of our loot, which will be at least like a 10 to 15% increase in our loot. Everyone here knows that that number is bigger than 7 or 8% off the quant. So we know that that number is better. But that is just kind of like my theory. And then I would say like we actually make a pretty decent amount of our currency off of just dropping maps too. So I would say the map dupe one is actually very, very nice as well. We don't really make that much money off of Scarabs. Unfortunately, maybe like 5% of our loot was Scarabs, maybe even less. But anyways, besides that stuff, it's just really boilerplate. We want to have these explicit modifiers to our maps are like the most important nodes. This is the rice hat right here. And also these 3 nodes here. I mean, this is just standard, right? We go rice hat with the head right here. These are just like increased quant. Who doesn't want that? It's pretty straightforward. We come up here for 16.5s. And yeah, that's pretty much the entire atlas. It's really straightforward stuff. And that's not really like a complicated issue for the Blight maps. And there's nothing really out of the ordinary here. So what Scarabs are we actually going to be running? We're essentially going to be running these 4. Blight Heart, which just makes it so you get more Blight loot. This Scarab is incredibly important. And I think one of the main reasons why Blight ends up becoming so profitable, but also why it's so difficult is because from now on, when you create empowering towers and you get them to level 3, and it has to be level 3, all the monsters within the range of the tower will have increased toughness and then as a result, drop increased loot. As you will see when you try this method, or maybe from one of the clips that I'll put in the background of this video, you will sometimes have maps where you have like 6 or 7 of these empowered towers just stacked up on top of each other. And when that happens, the monsters get quite juicy, especially because we are also running Scarab of the Blooming. This makes it so up to 3 lanes have unique bosses, okay? This is where a lot of the loot is going to be coming from, and also where a lot of the difficulty is coming from, because these unique bosses are pretty tough to begin with, but they also have 100% increased life. And then after that, we are going to be running 2x risk. So much juice on your map. If you can run it, I highly recommend that you do run as many as you can. However, if you can't run these 2 risk mods, or if you can only run 1, or if you don't feel comfortable running any of them, then I would recommend that you go Scarab of the Wisps. These are going to make the mobs a lot tankier though. So it's kind of like a lose-lose here, because the maps are going to be rippy as fuck. The monsters are going to be tanky as fuck no matter what. If you add the risk, what ends up happening is there's definitely some builds that just get completely bricked by certain tier 17 mods. And also Blight itself gets completely bricked by, I think, one mod specifically, is the mod where the monster action speed cannot be reduced below 100. So that your freezing and stun towers are completely useless against the mobs, which you're gonna need for sure. Otherwise, you're absolutely just gonna get overrun. Like, you just don't do enough damage. It's impossible. No one does enough damage to kill the mobs. And then also the volatiles can definitely be rough on this map, because what ends up happening is that your PC just gets so fucked by all the mobs that are spawning, you are going to lag. I T-pose in like 30% of my maps. So if you are lagging a shit ton and you have volatiles that will 100% one-shot you, or at the very least 2 of them will kill you, it gets pretty hairy. And if you're not Trickster, getting like Drowning Orbs is also kind of bad. I mean, there's a lot of bad mobs. Like 3 for 10 is also really bad. Anyways, my point is that this is the best one, but it does have some risks. This is like second best, I would say. And it just makes it so everything's a lot tankier, and you already have some DPS issues, but it does make it so that your maps are pretty much unbreakable, which is very, very nice to have. These 3 Scarabs are like, you don't really have much leeway here. You need to have these 3, and then these, the last 2 options for your last 2 Scarabs. So what are we actually looking for here in terms of mappage? So there's like 3 primary things we're really looking for on our maps. The first 2 are pack size and quantity. These 2 are the most important stats in my opinion. And that's primarily because while the third most important stat that we have is currency, currency only accounts for like 65% of our total drops. So an additional percentage increase of currency only actually gives us like an additional 0.65% increase of our total loot. Whereas a total 1% increase in quantity or a total 1% increase in pack size roughly translates to a total 1% increase in loot. But in general, I was going for, I think, at least 150 quant and around 40 pack size with around a minimum of 170 currency. Now, a very important thing about these maps, when people like ask me for regex in the comments, like I almost never respond just because it's not as simple as plugging in a regex and rolling them. For example, I said you want 150 quant and 40 pack size, right? But what happens if you have 160 quant and 37 pack size? Is that acceptable? I would say yes. What if you have like 250 currency or 300 currency and only like 30 pack size, 130 quant? Is that acceptable? I would say yes as well, more than acceptable even. So I wouldn't look at regexes so strictly. In fact, for my regexes, I do something very, very simple. I just do something like 120 quant and like 150 currency. So there's two reasons why I do this. Number one is that when you're rolling maps, right, whether or not you're Calcs scouring or whether or not you're using chaos orbs, most of the time the maps are only gonna have 4 mods. So if you have a 4 mod map, almost never is it gonna meet your end result requirements. So what ends up happening is a lot of the times you're gonna have a map that makes it through this filter and will have like 130 quant and like 170 currency. And you're gonna need to exalt slam the last little bit of juice back onto the map. The second reason is that even theoretically, if you're rolling tier 17 maps, which guaranteed have 6 affixes on them, a lot of the time you won't get exactly what you want, which is to say, like the example I just gave, don't be too strict with like your regex and how you roll your maps. Have a fluid understanding of like what you're looking for and how sometimes if you get like a little bit too little of something, but you get way more of something else, that is totally acceptable as well. Okay, one thing I want to mention here, and I think a lot of you guys probably already know this, but how do you actually roll your maps? Actually, Bazooka Tank showed this to me, so shout out Bazooka Tank. What he told me was Calcs scouring your maps is actually a lot faster than chaosing maps, okay? Let's just put our regex in here, for example. The way I would normally do any sort of like regex crafting or regex like spamming is you just have your regex in here and then you just click through your maps. Something like this, it gets pretty fast. You're doing like 1 click every like second, maybe 2 clicks a second, something like this, right? That's how I rolled most of my maps beforehand. But instead of using chaos orbs, what you can actually do is you can Calcs scour, but you can do it way faster. Use this app called X Mouse. It allows me to rebound my wheel up and wheel down to left click, okay? So when I turn it on, I can now use my wheel scroll to left click, which makes it so I can end up scouring like an entire column of maps in pretty much the same time it takes me to just like chaos 2 or 3 of them. So you just end up going through your whole map section, scouring it really, really quickly. And I'm actually slow at this. You watch Bazooka Tank do this, he can do this whole thing in like 3 milliseconds. It's actually kind of crazy. You X mouse, scour your whole map section, and then you X mouse or rebinding your whole section. You can't possibly roll over a map, and this is so much faster than what I was doing before. Now, theoretically, you can do the same thing with chaos orbs, but like you are going to roll over your maps a lot of the time when you're doing this, okay? It's just going to happen. And also, it's way more expensive, but I'll get into that in a little bit. But to give you an example of what I was kind of talking about before, right? This has 179 currency, shit quant, shit pack size, and then like, what, 1 open suffix? This one has 319 currency, 30 pack size, 124 quant. This one has 179 currency, 50 scarab, which we kind of care about, not really though. 31 pack size, 132 quant. So what you can just do here now, if these had 2 open affixes, I would 100% every single time double exalt slam. But you just slam on pretty much all of them. Boom. We hit 140 quant, 46 pack size, 179 currency. This is probably just good enough. This one right here is a no-brainer. It has 1 open suffix, 319 currency, 30 pack size. Even if we slam, nothing changes on this map, we would still run this, okay? But we hit it and we get another 10 quant, 4 pack size. I would say this is more than good enough to run. We just do that for all of our maps that make it through our filter. And like you can kind of determine for you what personally you'd want to do for your filter. Like here, this one's probably not good enough for me. I would just say skip this map, but this one definitely good enough. This one I would say very, very borderline, right? Like I said before, we want 150 quant, 40 monster pack size, and then 179 currency at the minimum. You know, we have lower quant, higher pack size, bare minimum currency. This is like probably like the minimum of what I would accept, and we just accept it. Cool. There's one more thing that we actually need to do here for these maps, and that is create a separate filter for our unrunnable mods. So the way we actually do this is we come back to this Regex website here with map mods, and then all we want to do here is just add any of the mods that we don't want. So for example, there's 2 mods that in my opinion absolutely break it, and that is action speeds cannot be modified below base values. So this essentially makes it so that our stun and freeze towers do nothing against the monsters, which is terrible. It actually just completely bricks the map. We don't want is like volatiles. It just gets so laggy in these maps. Not really feasible for me to run these 2. And then lastly, something like reduced defenses. This bricks a lot of builds, especially CI builds like mine. And then now the website will give you a regex again. It'll only show maps that don't have these mods. 3 example maps here to kind of showcase this. And boom, this one is not lit up, which means it has one of the mods that we don't want. In this case, it's going to be the 25% less defenses there on the 4th line. The reason why we do this is because it costs us like half a div worth of currency, just rolling the maps with the Calcs Scour or the Chaos and then exalting on the last 2 mods. It's quite an expensive process. So this map is like almost bricked. What we're essentially going to do now is fish for like a 1 in 6 annul. These annuls cost like 3C each. So if we hit the 1 in 6 to remove the defenses, awesome. We just have to exalt it back on. It costs us like 23C in order to get a completed map when it would normally cost us like 70. And it also saves us the time rolling everything again. So let's see. Boom, and we didn't hit it off, right? So this map is bricked, that's okay. And if you roll like 30 maps like this, there will probably be like 5 or 6 that won't meet these modifier or these affix requirements that we have here. If they make it through our first filter, which is just the quant, pack size, and currency requirements, and then they make it through this filter, which is the no brickable modifier requirements, then these maps we know for a fact are 100% ready to run. And then we just put the fries in the bag and we run them. Yeah, so let's just run through a map and let me show you guys what it looks like. The first half of the map is just really straightforward. All we're gonna do is rush the boss. If there's a bismuth blast, we love that shit. So we killed the boss for like one pretty simple reason, and that's just so that we can see better altars. So if you kill the boss first, you will never see boss altars, which just makes it so you have a higher chance of seeing the things that we do care about, like currency dupe, quant, etc. Once we kill the boss, we can just come out here and then just start killing all of the normal monsters. I checked the merc, you don't really have to. It's kind of a waste of time too some of the time, but it takes you like 2 seconds. And then here you go, 13% quant. Shock doesn't matter. We're completely ailment immune from purity of elements. And if we weren't, we would have another reason to, another 20% quant here. And then here we just, oh, this is blue altars, yeah. That's an oopsies here. We shouldn't be running blue altars. We're not strong enough to. So we have to be a little bit more careful. I highly recommend you run red. We were spec down to blue though for, because we're dumb as fuck. But because we're actually testing out some alpha stuff right now. But non-damaging elements are reflected back to you. That does not matter. You don't have anything that we really need to worry about here. And then, yeah, you just clear through the map. You grab the bismuth if you can. You grab the Viridian Wildwood if you can. Those are obviously insano juices, but we're pretty much just clearing the map right now just so that we have a chance to spawn more altars. Physical reduction we don't care about. For more quant, sure, we take that. And we find Cassia here, and we're almost always going to want to drop a portal behind her. And that's because when you die and you go to town or you go to your hideout, the blight doesn't stop. So you want to make sure that if you die, you can just jump back into the portal and then immediately start the blight. Essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to spawn pumps and we're going to make sure 2 things, right? We're going to set up as many empower towers as we can, which is the green ones. We're going to get them to level 3, which is empower. And then we're going to try and set up 2 defensive towers. So one is an ice tower level 3 and the other is a stun tower level 3 as well. We have these anoints on our rings, which affect the specifically level 3 chilling tower and the level 3 empower tower, okay? This is incredibly important to do, but like the chilling tower is going to be our primary line of defense with the stun tower. And then the empower towers are going to be what buffs up the mobs a shit ton in terms of like making them harder to kill, but also giving them just an absolute shit ton of more loot. One other thing you're going to notice, depending on like the way the lanes split and depending on how strong the map is, I will set up an additional freeze tower and set this to level 4 and make ice cage, specifically because I am currently running a KB build, and the KB builds, they can kind of shotgun off of walls. So that is what I plan on doing. But even if you don't run KB, it's still nice to have the stun tower, the freeze tower, and the wall tower just to like slow the mobs down a little bit. So we check here and it doesn't even matter because like I said before, our 2x risk mobs rolled action speed. So we are absolutely cooked here, but I can show you what that actually looks like. And if this does happen, and it will happen from time to time, instead of setting up 1 freeze and 1 stun, you're going to set up 2 freezes, but you're going to have them be double ice wall. So here's another thing. This is going to happen too, all right? You see this? This is just a fucking cooked map, all right? You have 5 lanes, and they're all split from each other. So the problem here is that you're not going to get that much loot, but what ends up happening is you have to run so many defensive towers. You don't have enough in power, so even if you do clear the map, you're going to get like 1 tink at most. So here you set up the freeze tower, and like it doesn't do anything. They can't be slowed because of that map mod. So this is the, oh, that's a freeze bolt tower. That's the wrong one. But then you go left side here, glacial cage tower. This is actually kind of nice because now it sets up these cages and you see I just absolutely melt them because they're in the cage. And then you want to set up all these empower towers here. So these green ones to level 3, these are empower towers. They make it so now any monster in the range has increased toughness. They're harder to kill. They do more damage, I think. I'm not sure. But they also drop more loot. So one thing you can also do here is you see this imbuing tower. Oh, another thing is when you pause the game, you still see like what the options are and like what your petals are. you can click this as well in viewing tower. Instead of buffing the monsters, it buffs you at the cost of losing an empower tower, which means less loot. I would say most maps, at most, I'll run 1 stun level 3, 1 freeze level 3, and then 1 freeze level 4. I'll rarely run this, but I will if I have like an 8 or 9 lane giga map and it's just like getting really difficult, and it's just better to have one of these some of the time. But you want to set it up anyways. So like sometimes you can set this up for free and it doesn't really matter, but I'll kind of get into that later on. But these are just kind of like the levers you can use depending on like how much you're struggling with the blights. You can kind of add or remove these levers depending on how powerful you are. But like as you can see here, these frost towers don't do shit to these mobs. There's that mod on the map. And another important thing is that like it doesn't actually matter too much if you fail your map, depending on like how deep you get into the map. Let's see, let's kill a few more mobs before we do this. So we're letting them win. We theoretically could have beat this, but it doesn't really matter because we have known powers. But like as you see, like we still drop a decent amount of loot. Not a lot because there's known powers and we only finished like half of the blight. But if you finish 90% of the blight, you're gonna get like around 90% of the loot. That's just one thing to consider. So don't feel too bad if you fail some blights. I failed like probably 30% of my blights, but a lot of them I was able to finish like more than 8% of them. I only missed out on like what, 0.2 times 0.3, which is like 0.06. So I only missed out on like 6% of the loot. Not that big of a deal. Also, there's a blight sis. That's gonna be like 1% of the loot that you get from these maps, okay? Oh, and I highly recommend that you like set up a filter. I'll link my filter in the description as well. You're gonna wanna pick up alterations. I was able to sell like 20K of them yesterday for like 9 to 1. I think right now they're like 12 to 1, but even at 12 to 1, 20 of these is like 1.5C. So just something to consider. But let's run another map. We're switching to Exarch as well because that's like kind of what we're checked in for, but blue is definitely better if you can run them. I just personally can't run them. So it's going to be the exact same process. I might even just skip to the blight for you guys. So what do we have here? This is an insanely good map. As an example, this is probably what you'll see on average. This is 6 lanes, very nice. There's no splits. So when there's no splits, the idea is very, very straightforward here. We are going to just want to set up as many of these green pumps as we can. I like to just set up level 1s for everything at first because it's a lot easier to click this button 2 times than it is to kind of click this button and then go through the entire menu and then try and figure it out. And then I'll set up one of these up here to level 3 and then set up one of these here to level 3 as well, for prioritizing the ice one over the other ones, okay? And then we just come over here, set up more green ones near like where they spawn, and then we have like our defenses back there. So we just keep pumping this up, keep pumping this up. Want to get these to level 3 ASAP. And then I'll actually do something here where I will set up one more defensive tower at the beginning here, once we kind of see where all the things are. So we want this to be like another ice tower. And here, what we want to do is set up more of these. Okay, so what is the reason that we set up the ice tower here? Because it's like, theoretically, like if we set up an ice tower here, it's going to be less juice because there's going to be less empower overlaps. But if they make it past this overlapped area, then we're going to actually end up losing more juice. So it's better just to have one thing or maybe even 2 towers here to stop the mobs in your kill zone. If the mobs die here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 empower tower overlaps on them, which is fucking insane, okay? So that's why I highly recommend you set up one like defensive tower right near all of your giga towers, and then you have all of the towers near your pump, like right here at the last defensive line to be like a backup thing, okay? But you don't want to just only have the backup thing. I made that mistake a lot. You end up losing a lot of value to that. Ultimately, the most important thing is where these unique monsters spawn from. If the unique monsters spawn in a good spot with a bunch of overlap, you will get a lot more loot. The primary amount of your loot is going to be from these unique monsters. As you can see, I am like, I think around 180 to 200 million DPS KB, and these guys are tanky as fuck, right? They have 100% increased life. You're probably going to get a lot of life nodes on your map rolls itself. And there's also like 4 additional risk mobs because we have risk scarabs, right? These end up being incredibly tanky a lot of time. And what ends up happening is you will get just absolutely overrun. Your computer is going to like pretty much shut down. You're going to T-pose and you're just going to be like completely lagging out. I highly recommend that if you ever have a situation like that, you have to prioritize to a certain degree killing the shitter mods, okay? If you kill the shitter mobs, you will end up saving your computer, which will allow you to actually fight the uniques a little bit better. Because a lot of times the uniques will just be perma-stunned here. It's actually so broken, these freeze towers. These unique monsters have not moved a single inch. They just spawn and insta get frozen. This is primarily because we have this. The chilling tower buff is so important. Another thing to consider as well is what is the bane of your existence here? It is going to be proximity shields. That is going to be one thing that you're going to struggle with a lot. So if you see proximity shield mobs, you want to kill them ASAP. Those guys are going to be a huge issue for you. So at this point, I feel pretty comfortable with my map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give up a little bit of defenses and I'm going to upgrade this glacial cage tower to essentially increase my DPS because I feel comfortable enough to do that, okay? So as you see there, the glacial cage, once they get into the cage, my KB actually does a fuck ton of damage to them. It's actually disturbing how much damage I do. It increases my DPS by like 5x or some shit. I'm waiting for there to just be like unique mobs, and then I use my toughness petals because, like I said, unique mobs are going to be where you get most of your loot. My damage is pretty low. It's probably like 40% of what a mere simplex build will do. If you are richer than me, you will be able to do a lot more damage than this. This is kind of like what a typical map looks like. They are tanky as fuck. They are super hard to kill, and you should just kind of expect that. But we're in a situation here where like these are the last 4 mobs, so like I'll just turn this into a glacial cage and you'll see how much more damage we do. Boom. No problem at all. And then you want to clear all these bounties. These have the potential to drop loot. And look at here. We didn't get a single tank here. That was actually kind of unlucky. I would say I would average 1 or 2 tanks per map. But think about it like this, okay? We dropped a fucking sacred orb. I dropped 2 logs in 75 maps. You're gonna be getting insane currency loot from this for the most part. What else is there here? There's a bunch of shitter currency. If we just pick up the shitter currency, like the stacked decks, the random scarabs that you get, it's gonna add up to like around 1 div in loot no matter what. But on top of that, we have 2 fortress maps and a jungle valley. Fortresses are selling for 0.75. Jungle valleys are selling for 0.7. So this is like 2 div in just maps. You're gonna be dropping like 5 to 10 unique belts. Not just unique items. You're gonna be dropping like 5 to 10 unique belts on average. So I got 3, what's it called? Mage Bloods off of these. You're gonna be getting a lot of unique items here. And then you also have this Blight sack. You only get the Blight sack if you actually complete the map. This one is, what is it, div cards? The good ones are oil and currency pretty much. And then like stacked decks, that's not bad. These are what, like half a div in stacked decks? We take those, right? And then boom, another jungle valley here. Even on the maps where you don't get tanks, you are going to be getting just a fuck ton of loot. And if we like were to price check all of this here, I would say this is easily like 4, maybe 5 div in currency or in total drops. And we didn't get a single tank. And keep in mind, you're normally getting like 2 or 3 tanks per map. And getting tier 0 uniques, also not common, but like I wouldn't say it's rare. You probably got tier 0 every like 15, 20 maps. That is kind of like the standard map that you're gonna see. And that is pretty much my entire TED Talk on Blight maps. If you love loot explosions, Blight I think is the best content in the game for you. The tower defense elements of it are also really fun. They kind of scratch a certain part of your brain, but I would say the difficulty of it is incredibly high. Anyways, that is all. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like the video, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you guys do actually try out the method, I would love to hear about your results and whether or not my 2 Hinekora locks was giga lucky or if that's pretty standard over 75 maps. That is all. I hope to see you guys in the next one. 07.